Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, and with this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on episode 7 of the anime series, Akuma no Riddle. And this was absolutely a spectacular episode as far as I was concerned, because we really saw the tension ramped up in a different approach to how they were going to try to kill Haru this time around, with the classmate in class Black Shuto, who suffers from Highlander syndrome. She doesn't age. She's probably been around for anything like decades it could have been, you know. It's very intriguing, her story, and the way in which she approaches this whole murder game. She creates a game out of it. They basically have this sort of vacation time, if you will. They decide to let their hair down, and they go to this pool enclosure, sort of, bathing and having fun, frolicking place. There are water slides and everything. It's very interesting that this is part of their entire sort of school, or at least that's what the dialogue suggests. And Shuto ends up putting this sort of explosive neck brace that locks around Haru's neck when they're all in the locker room putting on their bathing suits and choosing what they're going to wear and everything like this. And I was really afraid at that moment that this was really going to be an over-the-top comedic fan service episode. Not that I have an overarching problem with those kinds of things, but, I didn't want that to be all there was, and this was quite the opposite. There was a lot more depth and intrigue going on in this episode to do with the chasing down of this numerical equation that, basically Takaku was only going to have 3 attempts to input as a code into this neck brace. Otherwise, it was going to explode at midnight or what have you. And, she's basically being led on a merry chase. There are 4 cards, playing cards, that are strewn all over this environment, hidden in various places. Each one has a riddle as to how to find it. There are hints and everything. And it was very cool to see the cunning with which Takaku, as well as Haru figured out a couple of them as well, where these were going to be located and everything like that. But there was a very intriguing twist when it came to the last one, which involved a sacrifice needing to be made in order to use it. And that is basically the loss of life. So essentially, we see Takaku go willingly into this water slide. She ends up in this sort of cage that goes down under the water. She's, for all intents and purposes, going to drown, but she has made the sacrifice willingly that she wants to save Haru. And we have this touching moment where Haru, jumps in the water and almost as if they're kissing, she blows air into Takaku's lungs because she's going to drown. She uses the key to open the cage, and it's one of those double-edged sword things where it's going to do one of 2 things. Either it's going to open the cage, or they're going to be able to get the card out of the box and put that last numerical equation into this code. And it's one or the other, in other words. It was very intriguing and compelling to me to see that both of these girls care about each other so much that they would be willing to sacrifice, one another, each other for the other and everything like that. And what's very fascinating, too, is how this wraps into the history of the Shuto character. As we find out, because of this Highlander syndrome she suffers, she had found a love of her life. They grew up together, only she never aged, and she's stuck in this physical presence of almost a child and had to watch this person grow older and older and older and eventually leave her, for whether it's societal taboos because of the appearance of the age difference or because it was just they wanted to be with someone who was aging naturally. And that all played into her wish, by the way, which I found, even as brief as it was referenced, it carried more weight to me than some of the last assassins who they were trying to really make us feel sympathetic toward. I was really feeling sympathetic toward Shuto in this episode because, her life came at a cost, and that was basically this immortality that she has to suffer, seeing people move beyond her and die and wither away, and she loses things time and time and time again. I found this very resonating because it relates to things like, the character of Superman that I'm a big fan of, or Wolverine from X-Men. Characters who do not age are always suffering the losses over time, and so that really resonated with me from right off the bat. But then you add her sort of chess game, master manipulator way of dealing with all this, and they figured out at the last second it was all down to Haru that, maybe it was her birthday was going to be the last code. They had one last chance because, of course, there was a dummy code of, 4 sevens, and then there was a secondary code that they thought was the correct one that one of the other assassins put into the collar. But were it not for Haru's paying attention to the story Shuto tells about this lover and the fact that they had almost the same birthday. They were only one day apart. They assumed that it was Shuta's birthday. No, rather, it was the one day later that was her lover's birthday. And it was just really fascinating how this all played out and how it was, again, sort of a strategic game, this chess game of life and death. And I just was really fascinated and riveted the whole way through, seeing these girls kind of arguing over, what the code could be, figuring out the dummy code and everything, being tricked into that, and the idea of sacrifice that now has left Takaku with this realization that, maybe she's harboring feelings for Haru, where she was probably in denial about that up until this point. Will Haru be reciprocative? We don't know yet. That may end up being the case, maybe not. And but it's just a fascinating turn of events, this episode, for this series, especially with the last couple that kind of left me half and half. I didn't really get into them as much as I probably should have, and this one completely won me over again. I enjoyed this episode thoroughly. So yeah, otherwise that'll be pretty much it for me on this. I hope this video finds you well. I'll catch you all later. Peace.